Hello there. Welcome to Drifting Off Learning Channel. You have found your way to this quiet moment at the end of your day, and that is a gentle accomplishment in itself. Wherever you are resting now, in whatever softness holds your body, know that you have arrived at a place of peace, a place where nothing is asked of you, where no task awaits, where the only purpose is to rest. The day behind you has asked much of you, has pulled at your attention and your energy, has filled your mind with thoughts and concerns. But now, in this quiet hour, you may set all of that aside, allowing it to drift away like clouds moving slowly across a distant sky. Let your body settle more deeply into whatever surface supports you. Feel how completely you are held, how the weight of your limbs can be released, how you do not need to hold yourself up or prepare for anything that might come next. Your breathing can slow now, not through effort or concentration, but simply through permission. Each breath in brings a little more calm. Each breath out carries away a little more of the tension you have been carrying. There is no right way to breathe, no technique to master. Simply allow your body to do what it knows how to do, what it has always known how to do, what countless generations of your ancestors did before you, night after night, as they too settled into rest. If you find comfort in returning to this channel, in these gentle words spoken in the darkness, you are warmly welcome to subscribe, to make this a place you visit whenever sleep feels far away. But there is no urgency in that invitation, no expectation. It is simply an open door, a path that will remain available should you ever wish to walk it again. Tonight, we will turn our attention softly to the subject of how ancient people slept, to the ways our distant ancestors found their rest, to the beds they made, and the darkness they welcomed, and the dreams that visited them across thousands of years of human existence. This is a gentle subject, one that connects us to the deep past, to the long lineage of sleepers who came before us, who closed their eyes in caves and huts and palaces, who surrendered to the night just as you are surrendering now. There is something comforting in knowing that sleep is ancient, that it has always been part of human life, that the rest you seek tonight is the same rest that humans have sought since the very beginning of our species. The earliest humans, those who lived hundreds of thousands of years ago, slept in ways that we can only partially reconstruct from the traces they left behind. They did not have beds as we understand them, no mattresses or pillows, no sheets or blankets made of woven fabric. Instead, they made do with what the earth provided, with soft grasses and leaves, with animal skins and the natural hollows of caves. In some ancient sites, archaeologists have found what appear to be sleeping areas, places where the ground was deliberately prepared, where vegetation was gathered and arranged to create a softer surface for rest. These early beds were simple, but they were beds nonetheless, places set aside specifically for the purpose of sleeping, for the nightly renewal that every human being requires. The caves where many early humans sheltered offered natural protection from the elements and from predators, and the back areas of these caves, away from the entrance, were often chosen as sleeping places. There, the temperature was more stable, cooler in summer and warmer in winter than the outside air. There, the darkness was deeper, more complete, uninterrupted by the light of the moon or the stars. Our ancestors slept in this primordial darkness, their bodies curled on beds of gathered materials, their breathing slow and steady as they journeyed through the night. The sound of their companions sleeping nearby was perhaps a comfort, a reminder that they were not alone, that they were part of a group that would watch over each other through the vulnerable hours of rest. Fire, when it was mastered, changed sleep forever. The light and warmth of a fire extended the usable hours of the day, but it also transformed the night into something less threatening. A fire burning at the mouth of a cave or in the center of a camp meant warmth, meant light that could keep predators at bay, meant a social gathering point where stories could be told before sleep came. The soft glow of firelight on cave walls must have been among the first things that ancient children saw as they drifted off to sleep. The flickering shadows a gentle presence as consciousness faded. Even now, thousands of generations later, many people find the sight of flames restful. Perhaps because deep in our biology, fire still means safety, still means that someone is keeping watch, still means that it is safe to close our eyes. The beds of prehistory evolved over time, becoming more elaborate as human ingenuity developed. In some ancient sites, raised platforms of stone or wood have been found, structures that lifted the sleeper off the cold ground and away from the insects and small creatures that might otherwise disturb rest. These platforms were sometimes covered with layers of vegetation, with reeds or rushes or dried grasses that provided cushioning and insulation. The effort that went into creating these sleeping arrangements tells us something important: that rest was valued, that comfort mattered, that even in times of great hardship and struggle, people took care to create the conditions for good sleep. In ancient Egypt, where the preservation of tombs and grave goods has given us an unusually detailed picture of daily life, beds were often made of wood, with frames that supported woven or leather surfaces. Some of these beds were quite simple, little more than wooden frames with legs to keep the sleeper off the floor, while others were elaborate pieces of furniture, carved and decorated, fit for royalty. The Egyptians slept on headrests rather than pillows, curved supports that cradled the head and kept it elevated from the sleeping surface. These headrests were made of wood or ivory or stone, and while they might seem uncomfortable to us, they served the practical purpose of keeping the elaborate hairstyles and wigs of the wealthy intact during sleep. The Egyptians also had no qualms about sleeping in the same room as their stored grain and possessions, the sleeping space often serving multiple purposes in the modest homes of ordinary people. The ancient Mesopotamians, those who lived in the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, also developed sophisticated sleeping arrangements. In the palaces of kings, beds were elaborate constructions of precious materials, inlaid with gold and ivory, draped with fine linens. But ordinary people slept on simpler surfaces, on mats of woven reeds, or on low platforms covered with textiles. The heat of the Mesopotamian summer made rooftop sleeping common, and many households would retreat to the roof as the sun set, catching whatever cool breezes might arise, sleeping under the vast canopy of stars. This practice of sleeping outdoors in warm weather has been common throughout human history, a simple solution to the problem of heat that our air-conditioned modern lives have largely forgotten. In ancient Greece, the bed was called a klein, and it served not only for sleeping but for reclining during meals and for receiving guests. The Greeks developed a culture of rest and repose, valuing the ability to relax and to enjoy leisure. Their beds were often made of wood, with legs that might be turned or carved, and with mattresses stuffed with wool or feathers or vegetable matter. The wealthy slept on more comfortable surfaces than the poor, a distinction that has persisted throughout human history, but even modest Greek households had some kind of bed or sleeping couch. The Greeks also recognized the importance of sleep for health and well-being, and their physicians wrote about sleep disorders and recommended various remedies for those who struggled to find rest. The Romans inherited many Greek customs and developed them further. Roman beds, called lectus, were important pieces of furniture, and the Romans distinguished between beds for sleeping and beds for dining, though both involved reclining. Roman mattresses were stuffed with materials ranging from straw for the poor to feathers for the wealthy, and Roman pillows supported the head and shoulders. The Romans were particularly fond of elaborate bed frames, some of which were made of precious metals or inlaid with exotic materials. They also developed a complex set of beliefs about sleep and dreams, seeing the night hours as a time when the gods might communicate with mortals, when the future might be revealed, when the soul might travel to other realms. To sleep was to enter a world of mystery and possibility, a nightly journey into the unknown. Ancient Chinese sleeping customs were shaped by different traditions and different materials. The Chinese developed the Kong, a heated platform that served as a bed in northern regions where winters were cold. The Kong was a remarkable piece of technology, a masonry structure with channels through which smoke from a fire could pass, warming the entire platform and allowing people to sleep in comfort even in freezing temperatures. Families would gather on the Kong for warmth, and the platform served not only for sleeping but for sitting and for working during the day. This efficient use of heat made cold winters more bearable and allowed human settlements to thrive in climates that might otherwise have been too harsh for comfort. In other parts of China, where the climate was milder, beds took different forms. Wooden bed frames, sometimes with elaborate canopies and curtains, provided privacy and protection from insects. The Chinese developed the concept of feng shui, the arrangement of space according to principles of harmony and energy flow. And the placement and orientation of beds was considered important for health and good fortune. To sleep with one's head pointing in a certain direction, in a room arranged according to proper principles, was believed to promote well-being and to invite positive influences. These beliefs about the arrangement of sleeping space persist in many cultures to this day. The peoples of Japan developed their own distinctive sleeping customs, most notably the futon, a thin mattress that could be rolled up and stored during the day, freeing the small living spaces of Japanese homes for other uses. The futon was placed directly on the floor, on top of tatami mats, and covered with a light blanket called a kakabuten. This simple sleeping arrangement was perfectly suited to the Japanese climate and to the Japanese aesthetic of simplicity and minimalism. The practice of sleeping on the floor, close to the earth, connected the sleeper to the ground beneath them, to the stability and permanence of the land. There is something grounding about sleeping low, something that our ancestors understood and that many cultures around the world have practiced. In India, traditional sleeping arrangements varied widely depending on climate, region, and social status. In hot regions, people often slept on simple mats or on charpoys. Lightweight beds made of a wooden frame with woven rope or fabric stretched across it. These beds allowed air to circulate beneath the sleeper, keeping them cooler in the intense heat. In cooler regions, bedding was heavier, with quilts and blankets providing warmth. The tradition of sleeping on the floor or on low surfaces was common, and in many families, members would sleep together in the same room, the presence of others providing safety and companionship through the night. The indigenous peoples of the Americas had their own rich traditions of sleep and rest. In the tropical regions, the hammock was developed, a suspended bed made of woven fibers that kept the sleeper off the ground and away from insects and other creatures. The gentle swaying of the hammock, responding to the sleeper's movements, may have been soothing, perhaps reminding of the movement experienced in the womb, or the gentle rocking that calms infants. Hammocks were practical in humid environments, allowing air to circulate around the body and preventing the buildup of moisture. They were also easily portable, an advantage for peoples who moved with the seasons or who traveled long distances. The hammock has spread from its origins in the Americas to be used around the world, and many people today find its gentle motion conducive to sleep. In the colder regions of North America, the indigenous peoples developed different solutions to the challenge of staying warm at night. Hide blankets made from the skins of buffalo, deer, or other animals provided insulation, and sleeping in enclosed structures such as teepees or lodges kept the wind at bay. The teepee was designed to be warm in winter and cool in summer, and a fire in the center provided both heat and light. Families slept around this central fire, their heads toward the walls and their feet toward the warmth. The hide walls glowed with a soft, reddish light when a fire was burning, creating a cocoon of warmth in the midst of the cold prairie night. The peoples of the Arctic, living in one of the harshest climates on Earth, developed sleeping arrangements that were marvels of adaptation. The igloo, made of blocks of snow, was warmed by body heat and small oil lamps, and the raised sleeping platform at the back of the structure was the warmest part of the interior. Families would sleep together, their bodies providing mutual warmth, bundled in layers of fur and hide. The extreme cold required extreme measures, and the Inuit and other Arctic peoples had perfected the art of staying warm enough to sleep even when temperatures outside plunged far below freezing. Their survival was a testament to human ingenuity, to the ability of our species to adapt to almost any environment and to find rest even in the most challenging conditions. In Africa, the continent where humanity first evolved, sleeping customs varied enormously across different regions and cultures. In the tropical forests, raised platforms kept sleepers away from the damp ground and from the many creatures that moved through the night. In the savannas, people often slept near fires, the flames providing both light and protection from the predators. In the deserts, the cool nights were welcomed after the blazing heat of the day, and people might sleep under the open sky, wrapped in whatever cloth or skin was available. The traditions of Africa were as diverse as the continent itself, shaped by local conditions and local materials, by the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. The beds of the ancient world were often shared spaces. In many cultures, families slept together, parents and children occupying the same bed or the same sleeping area. This practice provided warmth and protection, and it reflected a conception of family life that was more communal than the individualized sleeping arrangements of the modern Western world. To sleep alone was often unusual, a situation associated with isolation or with special circumstances. The presence of others in the sleeping space was normal, expected, and comforting. The sounds of breathing, the warmth of nearby bodies, the knowledge that one was not alone in the darkness, these were part of what made sleep feel safe. Servants and slaves in many ancient societies slept where they could, often on the floor of their masters' homes, in kitchens or workrooms, in whatever space was not needed for other purposes. Their sleep was rarely comfortable and often interrupted by duties that extended into the night. The distinction between the sleep of the wealthy and the sleep of the poor has always been stark, with comfort and privacy being privileges reserved for those with resources. Yet, even the poorest found sleep. Even the most uncomfortable surfaces eventually yielded to exhaustion, and the democratic nature of sleep meant that all humans, regardless of status, spent a portion of their lives unconscious, vulnerable, equal in their need for rest. Ancient travelers faced particular challenges in finding sleep. Those who journeyed by land had to carry their bedding with them, or sleep on whatever surfaces were available, on the ground by the side of the road, in caravanserais or inns of varying quality, under trees or in caves. The risks of sleeping in unfamiliar places were significant, from thieves to wild animals, to simply the discomfort of an unknown surface. Travelers learned to be adaptable, to find rest where they could, to accept that the comforts of home would be absent until their journey was complete. Sea voyagers faced their own challenges, sleeping in the confined quarters of ships, rocked by waves, never far from the sounds and smells of their companions. The ability to sleep under difficult conditions was a valuable skill, one that travelers and soldiers and sailors cultivated out of necessity. The architecture of ancient homes was often designed with sleep in mind. In hot climates, bedrooms were positioned to catch breezes and avoid the afternoon sun. In cold climates, sleeping areas were placed near sources of heat, often sharing a wall with a kitchen or a harding area. The materials used in construction, mud brick or stone or wood, affected the temperature and humidity of sleeping spaces, and builders learned over generations which configurations provided the most comfortable conditions for rest. The orientation of rooms, the placement of windows, the thickness of walls, all of these decisions influenced how well the inhabitants would sleep, and the accumulated wisdom of each culture was expressed in the design of its dwellings. In medieval Europe, the development of the Great Hall meant that many people slept in a single large room, with the lord and lady of the house in a bed that was often curtained for privacy, and servants and retainers sleeping on benches or on the floor. Privacy, as we understand it, was rare, and the sounds and movements of others were constant companions through the night. The bed itself became a status symbol in medieval society, an item of furniture that displayed wealth and taste. Beds might be carved and painted, hung with expensive fabrics, passed down through generations as valuable possessions. To own a fine bed was to announce one's position in society, to demonstrate success and respectability. The development of the four-poster bed in medieval and Renaissance Europe was partly practical, designed to support the canopy and curtains that provided warmth and privacy. These curtains could be drawn to create a small enclosed space within the larger room, a room within a room where the sleeper could find some measure of quiet and solitude. The curtains also helped retain warmth, an important consideration in drafty stone castles and houses without central heating. Climbing into a curtained bed must have felt like entering a safe haven, a cocoon of fabric and feathers, where the cold and noise of the outside world could be temporarily forgotten. The mattresses of ancient and medieval beds were filled with whatever soft materials were available and affordable. Straw was common for the poor, providing a surface that was at least softer than bare wood or stone. Feathers were preferred by the wealthy, creating mattresses that were plush and warm. Wool and horsehair were also used, each material offering its own properties of softness and durability. These mattresses required regular maintenance, had to be aired, and turned to prevent them from becoming flat or infested with insects. The phrase "sleep tight" may derive from the ropes that supported some mattresses, which needed to be kept taut to provide a comfortable sleeping surface. Maintaining a good bed was an ongoing task, part of the domestic labor that kept households functioning. The linens that covered ancient beds were also markers of status and wealth. Fine linen sheets, laboriously woven and carefully laundered, were expensive and prized. Woolen blankets provided warmth, while quilts and coverlets added layers of insulation and decoration. The bed, fully dressed, with its sheets and blankets and canopy, was a significant investment, worth more than many other household goods. Linen was sometimes passed down through generations, becoming softer with washing and age, a tangible connection to ancestors who had slept beneath the same fabric. The care of bedding was an important domestic skill, and the condition of a household's linens reflected on the competence and industry of those who maintained the home. Pillows have a long history, though their forms have varied greatly. The headrests of ancient Egypt and Asia, made of hard materials, served a different purpose than the soft pillows we use today, supporting the head at a specific angle rather than cushioning it. In some cultures, pillows were stuffed with herbs believed to promote sleep or to ward off evil spirits. Lavender, chamomile, hops, and other plants were used to create fragrant pillows that were thought to have calming properties. The idea that certain scents could promote rest is ancient, and while we might now understand this in terms of aromatherapy and the effects of scent on the nervous system, our ancestors had their own explanations for why a pillow stuffed with certain herbs seemed to bring better sleep. The light and darkness of the ancient world shaped sleeping patterns in ways that are difficult for us to fully appreciate in our artificially lit modern environment. Before the development of cheap artificial light, darkness came with sunset and lasted until dawn. There were candles and oil lamps, of course, but these were expensive to maintain and provided only limited illumination. Most people went to sleep not long after dark and rose with the dawn, their sleep schedules shaped by the natural rhythms of the sun. This alignment of human activity with the cycle of light and darkness meant that most people slept more hours than we do today, particularly in winter when the nights were long. The darkness was complete in a way that few of us now experience, unbroken by streetlights or screens, a profound blackness that invited rest. Some historians believe that before the Industrial Revolution, many people practiced what is called segmented sleep, sleeping in two distinct periods with a waking interval between them. A person might sleep for several hours after dark, wake for an hour or two in the middle of the night, and then sleep again until dawn. This waking period, sometimes called the watch, was used for various quiet activities, for prayer or meditation, for conversation with a sleeping partner, for small tasks that could be done by candlelight. The idea that sleep should be one continuous block is actually relatively recent, an expectation that developed alongside artificial lighting and industrial work schedules. Our ancestors may have had a more flexible relationship with sleep, accepting wakefulness in the night as natural rather than as a problem to be solved. Dreams have always been part of the human experience of sleep, and ancient cultures developed elaborate systems for understanding and interpreting them. In ancient Mesopotamia, dreams were believed to carry messages from the gods, and professional dream interpreters were consulted by kings and commoners alike. The Egyptians had dream books that cataloged the meanings of common dream symbols, texts that survive to this day and show us how seriously dreams were taken. In ancient Greece, temples of Asclepius, the god of healing, offered incubation, a practice in which people would sleep in the temple hoping to receive a healing dream. These dreams were interpreted by priests, and the treatments they suggested were often followed faithfully. Dreams were not considered mere random firings of the sleeping brain, but meaningful messages that deserved attention and interpretation. The Romans continued the Greek tradition of taking dreams seriously, and their literature is full of prophetic dreams and visions. The dream of Caesar's wife before his assassination, warning of danger, is just one famous example. Roman dream interpretation drew on Greek sources and developed its own traditions, with different types of dreams being classified and evaluated for their significance. The idea that dreams could reveal the future or provide guidance from the divine persisted through the ancient world and into the medieval period, when Christian and Islamic thinkers developed their own frameworks for understanding the messages that came in sleep. Ancient physicians understood that sleep was essential for health and devoted considerable attention to sleep disorders and their remedies. The Greek physician Hippocrates, often called the father of Western medicine, wrote about the importance of sleep and about the significance of dream content for understanding illness. His followers and successors developed detailed theories about the causes of insomnia and other sleep problems, and they recommended treatments ranging from changes in diet and exercise to various herbal preparations. Lettuce was believed by some ancient physicians to promote sleep, and opium poppies were known to induce drowsiness, though the risks of such powerful sedatives were also recognized. The search for substances that could bring sleep has been part of medicine since its beginnings, and ancient pharmacopoeias list many plants and preparations believed to be soporific. In traditional Chinese medicine, sleep is considered essential for the balance of yin and yang, and sleep disorders are seen as manifestations of imbalance in the body's energy. Acupuncture, herbal medicine, and various other treatments have been used for thousands of years to address problems with sleep. The Chinese medical tradition paid close attention to the quality and timing of sleep, recognizing that different organs were believed to be active at different hours of the night, and that waking at particular times might indicate problems with particular systems of the body. This holistic approach to sleep saw it as integrated with all other aspects of health and life, not as a separate function that could be addressed in isolation. Ayurvedic medicine, the traditional healing system of India, also placed great emphasis on sleep. According to Ayurvedic principles, sleep is one of the 3 pillars of health, alongside diet and the management of energy. Different constitutional types were believed to have different sleep needs and tendencies, and treatments for sleep problems were tailored to the individual. Herbs such as ashwagandha and brahmi were used to promote restful sleep, and practices such as oil massage and specific bedtime routines were recommended. The Ayurvedic approach to sleep was comprehensive, addressing lifestyle, diet, exercise, and mental state as all relevant to the quality of rest. The spiritual dimensions of sleep were important in many ancient traditions. In some cultures, sleep was seen as a time when the soul departed the body to travel in other realms. This belief made the treatment of sleeping persons particularly delicate, as waking someone too suddenly might prevent the soul from returning properly. The experience of dreaming, of seeming to be in other places and to encounter other beings, may have contributed to this belief. If you could travel to distant places in your dreams, perhaps your soul really was journeying while your body lay still. This conception of sleep as a kind of death, or as a doorway to other worlds, gave the nightly experience of rest a significance that extended far beyond the physical need for restoration. Prayer and ritual often accompanied the transition from waking to sleep in ancient societies. Bedtime prayers were common in many traditions, a way of seeking protection during the vulnerable hours of the night. The darkness was home to threats both physical and spiritual, and invoking divine protection was a way of ensuring safe passage through until morning. Children were taught prayers to say before sleep, and these rituals helped mark the transition from the activities of the day to the quiet of the night. The routines that preceded sleep served a psychological function as well as a spiritual one, signaling to the body and mind that the time for rest had come. The fear of nighttime was real in the ancient world, and not without reason. Predators, human and animal, were more active after dark. Fires could go out, leaving sleepers cold and vulnerable. Spirits and demons were believed to be more powerful in the darkness, and nightmares were sometimes attributed to supernatural attack. To sleep was to place oneself in a position of vulnerability, to surrender consciousness and control, to trust that morning would come and bring safety with it. The courage required to sleep in a dangerous world was rarely remarked upon, but it was real. Every night, our ancestors closed their eyes despite their fears, allowing exhaustion to overcome vigilance, trusting that whatever watched over them would keep them safe until dawn. The experience of sleeping outdoors, which was common for many ancient peoples, especially in warm weather, connected the sleeper to the natural world in ways that indoor sleeping cannot. Sleeping under the stars, you could see the slow wheel of the constellations across the sky, could feel the breeze on your skin, could hear the sounds of the night creatures going about their business. This was not romantic for most ancient people, but simply practical, a way of staying cool when indoor spaces were stuffy and hot. But the connection to the larger cosmos, the sense of being part of something vast and ancient, must have been part of the experience, even if it was taken for granted rather than consciously appreciated. The sounds of the ancient night were different from the sounds we hear today. There were no engines, no electronics, no mechanical hums or beeps. Instead, there were the sounds of nature, the calls of owls and the cries of foxes, the rustle of wind in leaves, the distant howl of wolves, the endless song of insects in warm weather. These sounds were familiar to ancient ears, part of the expected soundscape of the night, no more disturbing than the background noise of traffic is to a modern city dweller. And beneath these sounds, there was a silence that we rarely experience now, a profound quiet unbroken by the constant low-level noise of modern life. The length of sleep in the ancient world is difficult to determine with precision, but most evidence suggests that people slept longer than we typically do today. Without artificial light to extend the usable hours of the day, there were more hours available for rest. Work was often intense but seasonal, with long periods of relative inactivity during winter months when days were short and outdoor labor was impossible. During these times, people may have slept 10 or 12 hours or even more, building up reserves of rest that would be drawn upon during the busy seasons of planting and harvest. This seasonal variation in sleep is almost unknown in the modern world, where work schedules remain constant year-round, but it was a natural response to the rhythms of agricultural life. Ancient soldiers faced particular challenges when it came to sleep. On campaign, they might have to sleep in the open, on hard ground, in any weather. The need to remain vigilant, to guard against enemy attack, meant that sleep was often interrupted and never fully restful. Military texts from various ancient cultures discuss the importance of rest for maintaining the fighting capacity of troops, and good commanders knew that exhausted soldiers made poor warriors. The organization of watches, the rotation of guard duties, the provision of adequate rest when possible. These were aspects of military leadership that could determine the outcome of campaigns. The exhaustion of march and battle was one of the great challenges of ancient warfare, and many battles were won or lost by armies that were better rested than their opponents. Travelers in the ancient world stayed in inns when they could, establishments that offered food, drink, and a place to sleep. The quality of these accommodations varied enormously, from comfortable rooms with private beds to crowded dormitories where strangers slept side by side. The inns of the ancient world were gathering places, venues for the exchange of news and gossip, sometimes for entertainment and sometimes for less reputable activities. A traveler arriving at an inn would have no guarantee of a quiet night's sleep, and the annoyances of noise and discomfort were standard complaints in ancient travel writing. Yet the alternative, sleeping by the roadside without protection or shelter, was often worse, and travelers learned to accept whatever accommodations were available. The development of monasteries in the medieval period created communities dedicated in part to particular rhythms of sleep and waking. Monks rose in the middle of the night for prayers, interrupting their sleep in a pattern that was believed to be spiritually valuable. The monastic day was structured around the hours of prayer, with sleep taking its place alongside worship and work as one of the regulated activities of the religious life. This discipline of sleep was believed to train the spirit, to demonstrate devotion, to keep the monks focused on their sacred duties rather than on the pleasures of the body. The cell where a monk slept was simple, often containing nothing more than a hard bed and perhaps a few religious objects, a space designed to discourage attachment to comfort and to encourage focus on the spiritual. The beds of the Middle Ages in Europe became increasingly elaborate for those who could afford them. Great beds were sometimes built into the architecture of a room, permanent structures that would be dismantled only when the house itself was rebuilt. These beds might accommodate not just a husband and wife, but also children and servants. The idea of one person sleeping alone in a large bed being unusual and not particularly desirable. The warmth generated by multiple bodies was practical in unheated rooms, and the presence of others provided security in an age when households had to provide for their own protection. To sleep alone was often a mark of poverty or isolation rather than privilege. The invention of the chimney in the medieval period changed sleeping arrangements by allowing fires to burn in individual rooms rather than in a central hall. This meant that bedrooms could be heated, and people could sleep in smaller, more private spaces rather than gathered around a central hearth. The increasing warmth and privacy of sleeping spaces was a gradual development, with wealthier households adopting the new arrangements first, and poorer households continuing to sleep in shared spaces for centuries longer. The history of sleeping is in part a history of increasing privacy and comfort, though this progress was neither linear nor universal. Bedbugs and other pests have been the constant companions of human sleep throughout history. Archaeological evidence shows that bedbugs have lived alongside humans for at least several thousand years, and the battle against these and other biting insects is a recurring theme in domestic history. Various substances were used to repel or kill bugs, from certain herbs believed to be repugnant to insects to more extreme measures like pouring boiling water into the cracks of wooden bed frames. The phrase, "Don't let the bedbugs bite," comes from a real concern that was taken very seriously in times when infestation was common and treatment was difficult. Keeping bedding clean and dry was important for controlling pests, but complete elimination was often impossible. The feather bed, which became common in Europe during the medieval and Renaissance periods, represented a significant advance in sleeping comfort. Feathers provide excellent insulation and create a soft, yielding surface that molds to the body's shape. A good feather bed was a valuable possession, expensive to acquire and worth protecting. Feather beds needed regular care, had to be aired and fluffed to prevent them from becoming flat and lumpy. They were often passed down as inheritances, mentioned in wills alongside other valuable household goods. To sleep on a feather bed was to experience a luxury that had not been available to the earliest humans, a softness and warmth that the stuffed grasses and animal skins of prehistory could never provide. The sleeping customs of royalty were often elaborate and ritualized. The bedchamber of a king or queen was an important space, and access to it was a mark of favor and trust. The ceremony of the coucher, the putting to bed of the French king, was a public event, attended by courtiers who competed for the honor of handing the monarch his nightshirt or holding his candlestick. This ritualization of sleep demonstrated the importance of the royal person, every moment of whose life, waking and sleeping, was significant and observed. The bed itself was often the most magnificent piece of furniture in the palace, a stage upon which the drama of royal rest was performed. Children in the ancient and medieval world often slept with their parents, at least until they reached a certain age. The practice of co-sleeping, which is now the subject of much debate, was simply normal for most of human history. Separate beds and separate rooms for children were luxuries that only the wealthy could afford. And even among the wealthy, the practice varied by culture and period. The warmth and protection provided by sleeping near parents was practical, and the bond between parent and child was strengthened by the intimacy of shared sleep. The modern expectation that infants and children should sleep alone in their own rooms is historically unusual and far from universal even today. The technology of timekeeping affected sleep patterns as ancient peoples developed increasingly accurate ways of measuring the hours. Water clocks and sundials allowed for the scheduling of activities, though these devices were not available to everyone. In monasteries and later in cities with public clocks, bells would ring to mark the hours, including the hours of the night. These bells helped regulate community life, letting people know when it was time to rise or to sleep. The mechanical clock, developed in medieval Europe, would eventually transform the relationship between time and sleep, making it possible to schedule activities with precision that had previously been impossible. But this transformation was gradual, and for most of history, the rhythms of light and darkness remained more important than artificial timekeeping in determining when people slept. Ancient peoples developed various rituals and habits to transition from waking to sleep. The evening meal was often an important social occasion, a time for the family or household to gather before the darkness of the night. Storytelling was common in many cultures, with the hours before sleep being devoted to tales that entertained and instructed. Songs might be sung, prayers might be said, and the activities of the day might be reviewed and discussed. These transitional rituals helped mark the boundary between day and night, between activity and rest, preparing the mind and body for the different state of consciousness that sleep would bring. The experience of being woken from sleep was different in the ancient world than it is for us today. There were no alarm clocks, no phones to ring, no electric lights to suddenly illuminate the darkness. Waking came with the dawn, with the gradual lightening of the sky that signaled the end of night. Or it came with the crowing of roosters, whose morning calls have served as natural alarm clocks for thousands of years. Or it came with the nudge of another person, a family member or servant, whose job it was to ensure that sleepers rose at the appointed time. This gradual awakening, often aligned with the rhythms of nature, may have been gentler than the sudden jarring of a modern alarm, though oversleeping was certainly a concern when work needed to be done. The connection between sleep and death was recognized by many ancient cultures, and some of the vocabulary for sleep reflects this connection. In Greek mythology, Hypnos, the god of sleep, was the twin brother of Thanatos, the god of death, and both were children of Nyx, the goddess of night. This genealogy reflected the observed similarity between the sleeping and the dead, the stillness and unresponsiveness that characterized both states. Yet sleep was distinguished from death by its reversibility, by the awakening that came with morning. Sleep was sometimes called the brother of death, or the imitation of death, and the passage from waking to sleep was understood as a daily journey to the borders of the underworld, a nightly rehearsal for the final sleep from which there would be no waking. Sleepwalking and sleep-talking were known in the ancient world and were often interpreted as having supernatural significance. A person who walked or spoke in their sleep might be possessed by a spirit, or might be receiving messages from the gods, or might be reliving experiences from a past life. These behaviors were sometimes frightening to observers, who might be uncertain whether the sleepwalker was still present or whether some other entity had taken control of the body. Various treatments and precautions were recommended for those prone to sleepwalking, from tying them to the bed to surrounding the sleeping area with objects that would make noise if disturbed. The concept of beauty sleep, the idea that adequate rest is essential for looking one's best, has ancient roots. Greek and Roman writers commented on the effects of sleep on appearance, noting that well-rested individuals looked healthier and more attractive. The dark circles that appear under the eyes of the sleep-deprived were recognized, and the restorative effects of good sleep on the skin and hair were appreciated. Women in various ancient cultures developed elaborate nighttime beauty routines, applying creams and treatments that were believed to enhance their appearance while they slept. The bed was not just a place for rest, but a kind of beauty treatment, a nightly opportunity for the body to repair and renew itself. The sick and the elderly often spent extended periods in bed in the ancient world, and the bedroom became a place of care as well as of rest. Physicians might visit patients in their beds, and treatment often involved prescribing specific types of rest or specific positions for sleeping. The convalescent bed was a place of recovery, where the body could direct its energies toward healing rather than toward the demands of daily activity. For the dying, the bed became the site of the final transition, the place from which the soul would depart for whatever awaited after life. Many ancient peoples considered it important to die in one's own bed, surrounded by family, rather than away from home among strangers. The fear of sleeping alone in the darkness was addressed in various ways by ancient peoples. Night lights in the form of small oil lamps or candles provided some illumination, though these were luxuries not everyone could afford, and posed risks of fire if left unattended. The presence of pets, particularly dogs, in the sleeping area was common, and provided both warmth and a sense of protection. The sounds of others sleeping nearby, even if they were in separate beds, was reassuring, a sign that one was not alone in the vulnerable hours of the night. The complete darkness and solitude that many modern people experience in their bedrooms would have been unusual and perhaps frightening to our ancestors, who were accustomed to more communal forms of rest. travel across time zones is a modern phenomenon, but ancient peoples who traveled long distances over land or sea still experienced disruptions to their sleep patterns. The differences in the length of days between northern and southern latitudes, the changes in sunset and sunrise times as one moved east or west. These could affect sleep even though the underlying cause was not understood. Travelers might find themselves unable to sleep at the local nighttime or drowsy during the local day, experiencing something analogous to what we now call jet lag. Adapting to new environments took time, and the seasoned traveler learned to expect a period of adjustment when arriving at a new destination. The preparation of the sleeping space before bed was an important part of the daily routine in ancient households. Beds might be made up fresh each night with clean linens, or the bedding might be aired and fluffed before use. Chamber pots were positioned for nighttime use, and candles or lamps were prepared for those who might need light during the night. Windows might be shuttered to keep out cold, or opened to admit cool breezes depending on the weather. These preparations signaled the approaching end of the day and helped create the conditions for comfortable rest. The person responsible for these tasks, often a servant or the lady of the household, was performing an important service, ensuring that the family could sleep in comfort. The development of pajamas and night clothes has a long history. In some cultures, people slept in the same clothes they wore during the day, simply removing outer layers. In others, special garments were worn for sleeping, lighter and looser than daytime clothes, designed for comfort rather than appearance. Nightshirts for men and nightgowns for women became common in Europe during the medieval period, though the poor might continue to sleep in their ordinary clothing or with minimal covering. The nightcap, worn to keep the head warm in drafty bedrooms, was a common accessory, and some cultures developed elaborate sleeping costumes for the wealthy that were works of fashion in their own right. Ancient peoples recognized different types of sleep and different qualities of rest. A light sleep from which one could easily wake was distinguished from a deep, unconscious slumber. The refreshing sleep that left one feeling restored was different from the troubled sleep that brought exhaustion rather than rest. Some ancient writers distinguished between natural sleep and the sleep induced by exhaustion, illness, or substances. The quality of sleep mattered, not just the quantity, and the ancient physicians and philosophers who wrote about rest understood that not all sleep was equal. The pursuit of good sleep, of the kind of rest that truly restored body and mind, was as important to our ancestors as it is to us. Festivals and holidays often involved changes to normal sleeping patterns. Nights of celebration might be spent awake, with feasting and dancing, and entertainment extending until dawn. Religious observances might require night-long vigils or early rising for ceremonies at dawn. The normal rhythms of sleep and waking were suspended on these special occasions, and the resulting exhaustion was accepted as part of the cost of celebration. After the festival, there would be time to recover, to sleep longer and deeper to make up for what had been lost. This flexibility in sleep patterns, the ability to adapt to special circumstances while returning to normal routines afterward, was part of the human relationship with rest. The effects of the seasons on sleep were pronounced in the ancient world. Long winter nights meant more hours of darkness and often more hours of sleep. Short summer nights meant less sleep, but also less need for it, as the longer days provided more time for work, and the warmer temperatures made sleep easier to achieve in shorter periods. This seasonal variation was built into the expectations of ancient peoples, who did not assume that sleep should remain constant throughout the year. The body's relationship with rest was understood to be dynamic, responding to the changing conditions of the natural world. The ancient philosophers considered the nature of sleep and what it revealed about the nature of the soul and the mind. Why did consciousness disappear during sleep, and where did it go? What was the self when it was not aware of itself? These questions were taken up by thinkers from various traditions, who developed different answers based on their underlying metaphysical commitments. For some, sleep was evidence that the soul was distinct from the body, able to withdraw temporarily while the body rested. For others, sleep was simply a physical phenomenon, a response to fatigue with no deeper spiritual significance. The mystery of sleep, the nightly dissolution of consciousness and its morning return, was a puzzle that invited philosophical speculation. The experience of nightmares was taken seriously in the ancient world, often attributed to supernatural causes. The word nightmare itself originally referred to a night demon, a mare or incubus that was believed to sit on the chest of the sleeper, causing feelings of suffocation and terror. Various cultures developed practices for warding off these night terrors, from prayers and charms to the placement of protective objects near the bed. The experience of sleep paralysis, in which the dreamer wakes but cannot move, was particularly frightening, and was often interpreted as evidence of demonic attack. The nightmares of ancient people were not less terrifying than our own, and the explanations they developed for these experiences reflected their understanding of the spiritual forces that operated in the darkness. The use of substances to promote sleep has ancient origins. Alcohol, which is a depressant, was known to induce drowsiness, and evening drinking was common in many cultures. The opium poppy was used medicinally to promote sleep and relieve pain, though its addictive properties were eventually recognized. Various herbs were brewed into teas or placed in pillows to encourage rest. The search for the perfect sleep aid, the substance that would bring deep and restful slumber without negative consequences, was as active in the ancient world as it is today, though the options available were more limited, and the understanding of how these substances worked was incomplete. The ancient Egyptians developed elaborate beliefs about the afterlife that influenced their approach to sleep and death. The mummification of bodies was meant to preserve them for the eternal sleep of death, and the tomb was furnished with everything the deceased might need in the afterlife, including beds for the eternal rest. The distinction between the temporary sleep of the living and the permanent sleep of the dead was clear, but the similarity between them was also recognized. Sleep was a nightly encounter with the realm of the dead, a journey from which the living returned each morning, but from which the dead would never return. The Greeks told stories about sleep that have influenced Western culture ever since. The story of Endymion, a shepherd so beautiful that the goddess Selene fell in love with him, ended with Endymion being granted eternal sleep, a state of perfect rest in which his beauty would never fade. This eternal sleep was depicted as a blessing rather than a curse, a gift that preserved youth and beauty forever. The concept of sleep as a kind of preservation, protecting against the ravages of time, runs through these myths. Sleep was an alternative to death, a way of suspending time, of holding a person in a state of perfect, unchanging rest. In the epic poetry of the ancient world, sleep often played a dramatic role. The Iliad describes how sleep and death carry the body of the fallen warrior Sarpedon from the battlefield, treating the two states as closely related. The Odyssey includes an episode in which Odysseus falls asleep at a crucial moment, allowing his men to open a bag of winds that blows them off course, Sleep in these epics was both a necessity and a vulnerability, a state that could not be avoided, but that carried risks. The hero who fell asleep at the wrong time might lose everything, but the hero who fought sleep too long would eventually collapse from exhaustion. The management of sleep was part of the art of survival. The Bible contains numerous references to sleep, from the deep sleep that fell upon Adam as God created Eve, to the prophetic dreams of Joseph and Daniel, to the disciples who fell asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane while Jesus prayed. Sleep in the biblical tradition was sometimes a gift from God, a sign of trust in divine protection, and sometimes a spiritual failure, a lapse in vigilance. The psalmist declares that God gives sleep to those he loves, while the prophets sometimes describe the lazy or sinful as trapped in a sleep from which they need to awaken. The richness of sleep symbolism in the Bible influenced centuries of Christian thought about rest and wakefulness. Medieval Christians developed elaborate beliefs about the spiritual dangers of the night. Demons were believed to be more active in the darkness, and the hours between sunset and dawn were times of particular vulnerability. Prayers before sleep invoked the protection of God and the angels, and the sign of the cross was made over the bed to ward off evil influences. The nightmare experiences of sleep paralysis and night terrors were understood as demonic attacks, and those who suffered from them were sometimes suspected of being in league with dark powers. The night was a battlefield, and the faithful Christian approached sleep with the same seriousness that they approached any other spiritual struggle. Islamic tradition also emphasizes sleep and its proper practice. The Prophet Muhammad recommended specific sleeping positions and prayers before sleep. Muslims are encouraged to sleep on their right side, and the bedtime prayers ask for protection during the night and for safe awakening in the morning. Dreams are considered potentially significant, possibly carrying messages from Allah, though not all dreams are considered meaningful. The call to prayer before dawn requires early rising, at least for the first prayer of the day, and the rhythm of the Islamic day is structured around the 5 daily prayers in ways that affect sleeping patterns. The balance between rest and worship is an ongoing concern in Islamic thought. The Buddhist tradition approaches sleep as another aspect of life to be approached with mindfulness. The Buddha is said to have slept only 4 hours per night, spending the rest of the time in meditation. While few practitioners aspire to such minimal sleep, the Buddhist emphasis on awakening, both in the literal sense of waking from sleep and in the spiritual sense of achieving enlightenment, gives sleep a particular meaning in this tradition. Sleep is compared to a kind of delusion, a state of unconsciousness from which one must awaken. Yet sleep is also necessary for health, and the Buddhist monastic rules include provisions for adequate rest. The middle way applies to sleep as to other aspects of life. Hindu traditions include various practices related to sleep, from the direction in which one should orient the head while sleeping to the mantras that should be recited before rest. The state of deep, dreamless sleep is considered by some Hindu philosophers to be a glimpse of pure consciousness, a temporary return to the undifferentiated awareness that underlies all experience. Sleep is one of the 3 states of consciousness discussed in Hindu philosophy, along with waking and dreaming, and the transitions between these states are the subject of much contemplation. The yogi who can remain aware during these transitions has achieved a significant spiritual accomplishment. The Romans developed a sophisticated vocabulary for different aspects of sleep and sleeping, with distinct words for drowsiness, light sleep, deep sleep, and the transitional states between them. This linguistic attention to the nuances of rest suggests that they observed and thought carefully about the experience of sleeping. Roman writers complained about the difficulties of sleeping in noisy cities, in crowded apartment buildings where noise from neighbors and from the streets below made rest difficult. The search for quiet sleeping spaces was as pressing a concern in ancient Rome as it is in modern cities today. The siesta, the afternoon nap still practiced in many warm climate cultures, has ancient origins. In the Mediterranean world, where summer afternoons are oppressively hot, the custom of retreating indoors for rest during the hottest hours of the day developed naturally. Work that was possible in the cooler morning and evening hours became impossible in the heat of midday, and the body's natural dip in alertness during the early afternoon made sleep the obvious response. This division of the day into two periods of activity, separated by a period of rest, is ancient, and may be more aligned with human biology than the single consolidated sleep period that became standard in industrialized societies. The beds of ancient palaces were sometimes elevated on platforms that raised the sleeper above the level of the floor, both for comfort and for symbolic reasons. The elevated bed distinguished the royalty and nobility from the common people who slept on lower surfaces, and the height of the bed indicated the status of its occupant. These elevated beds sometimes had steps or ladders for mounting, and they were often surrounded by curtains or enclosed in alcoves that provided additional privacy and warmth. The royal bedchamber was a space of power and intimacy, and access to it was carefully controlled. The night watch in ancient cities served multiple purposes that affected sleep. Watchmen patrolled the streets to guard against fire, crime, and other disturbances, calling out the hours and providing a sense of security. The calls of the watch might wake some sleepers, but for others, the regular announcements were reassuring, a sign that someone was vigilant while they rested. The organization of the night watch was one of the civic responsibilities of ancient governments, and cities without adequate watch were considered unsafe, their citizens sleeping less soundly for the lack of protection. Ancient peoples had various beliefs about the proper orientation of the body during sleep. Some cultures held that sleeping with the head to the north was dangerous, aligning the body with the magnetic field in ways that were thought to be harmful. Others recommended sleeping with the head to the east, facing the rising sun, symbolically aligned with the forces of renewal and rebirth. These beliefs varied from culture to culture and often had religious or philosophical justifications. The placement of the bed within the room and the direction in which the sleeper faced were matters that some took very seriously. The practice of sleeping in shifts, with different members of a household or community taking turns resting and watching, was common in situations where constant vigilance was necessary. Sailors at sea, soldiers on campaign, and herders watching flocks all developed systems for rotating through periods of sleep and wakefulness. These systems recognized that complete rest for everyone at the same time was not always possible, and that some sacrifice of sleep might be necessary for safety. The ability to fall asleep quickly and to wake refreshed from brief periods of rest was valued in these circumstances. The ancient Celts and Germanic peoples of northern Europe slept in conditions that were shaped by the cold and damp of their climate. The longhouses and roundhouses of these cultures were designed to retain heat, with central hearths that burned through the night and with sleeping areas arranged around the perimeter. Bedding was thick and warm, made of furs and woolen textiles that could withstand the cold winters. The extended family or household slept together, their combined body heat helping to warm the space. the long winter nights of the north meant many hours of darkness, and the extended sleep that resulted may have been necessary for health in those challenging conditions. Ancient physicians paid attention to sleep positions, recommending different ways of lying for different conditions and constitutions. Sleeping on the back was sometimes recommended for those with certain ailments, while sleeping on the side was suggested for others. The position of the limbs, the height of the head relative to the body, the thickness of the mattress, all of these were considered relevant to health and were the subject of medical advice. The idea that there is a correct way to sleep, a position that promotes health and prevents harm, is ancient, even if the specific recommendations have varied across cultures and time periods. The transition from sleeping in groups to sleeping alone or in couples was gradual and uneven across human history. In many traditional societies, communal sleeping remained the norm well into the modern era, with privacy in sleep being a luxury rather than an expectation. The Western emphasis on individual bedrooms and private sleep emerged alongside the development of larger houses with more rooms, alongside the growing value placed on privacy and individualism. This shift changed the experience of sleep, making it a more solitary and perhaps a more anxious experience than the communal rest of earlier times. Ancient craftspeople developed specialized skills for making beds and bedding, the weaving of mattress covers, the preparation of stuffing materials, the construction of bed frames. These were trades that required training and experience. A well-made bed was the product of skilled labor, and the craftspeople who made them were valued members of the community. The bed that served a family for generations was a testament to the quality of the work that went into its making, durable enough to outlast those who slept upon it. The sounds that accompanied sleep in ancient households were different from what we hear today. The crackle of the fire, the breathing of animals who shared the living space, the movements of others settling into rest. These created a soundscape of domestic life that was the background for sleep. Complete silence was rare and perhaps not even desired, as the small sounds of the household were reassuring, signs of life and warmth and company. The modern preference for silence during sleep, for soundproofed rooms and white noise machines, would have seemed strange to our ancestors, who were accustomed to sleeping amid the ordinary noises of their world. Infants in the ancient world slept in close proximity to their mothers, often in the same bed or in cradles positioned right beside it. Breastfeeding through the night was facilitated by this close arrangement, and the warmth and presence of the mother were considered essential for the well-being of the child. Separate nurseries and cribs were luxuries of the wealthy, and even among the wealthy, the practice of keeping infants close during the night was common. The development of the separate nursery, with the infant sleeping alone, is a relatively recent development in the long history of human parenting. The fear of dying in one's sleep, of slipping from rest into death without warning, was present in ancient cultures as it is today. Prayers before sleep often asked for the grace of waking in the morning, acknowledging the uncertainty of the night. Yet there was also a tradition of viewing death during sleep as a gentle end, a departure that spared the dying person the pain and fear of a waking death. To die in one's sleep was to be taken quietly, without the struggle that so often accompanied the end of life. This double attitude toward nocturnal death, both feared and hoped for, reflects the complex relationship between sleep and mortality. The ancient world knew of conditions that disrupted sleep, from physical ailments that caused pain to mental disturbances that prevented rest. Insomnia was recognized and written about, with various causes proposed and various remedies suggested. The inability to sleep was sometimes seen as a punishment or a curse, a condition that robbed its sufferers of the rest they needed. Those who could not sleep were objects of pity, condemned to wander through the night hours that others spent in peaceful oblivion. The search for sleep, the longing for rest that would not come, was a recognized form of suffering. Ancient travelers sometimes slept in trees to avoid predators, climbing into the branches and securing themselves so they would not fall. This practice, necessary in areas where dangerous animals roamed at night, required a different kind of rest, lighter and more alert than the deep sleep that was possible in safe environments. The ability to sleep while partially vigilant, maintaining enough awareness to detect danger while still obtaining some rest, was a survival skill. Our ancestors developed this ability over millions of years of evolution, and traces of it remain in our nervous systems today, in the way we can wake suddenly to unusual sounds while sleeping through familiar ones. The decoration of sleeping spaces was important in many ancient cultures. Walls might be painted with scenes intended to be restful or auspicious, or hung with textiles that softened the space and added warmth. The objects placed near the bed, whether religious symbols or personal talismans, were believed to influence the quality of sleep and the content of dreams. The bedroom was not merely a functional space, but a carefully prepared environment, designed to promote rest and to protect against the dangers of the night. The nursing of the sick often took place in bedrooms, where the patient could rest while receiving care. Ancient medicine placed great emphasis on rest as a component of healing, and the sickbed was a place where the body could direct its energies toward recovery. The bedroom of a sick person might be specially prepared, with particular attention to temperature, lighting, and quietness. Those who cared for the sick, whether family members or trained healers, often spent long hours at the bedside, watching over the patient's sleep and administering treatments as needed. The preparation of special beverages to promote sleep was common in many ancient cultures. Warm milk, herbal teas, and various alcoholic preparations were recommended for those who had difficulty falling asleep. These drinks were often consumed as part of a bedtime ritual, their preparation and consumption helping to mark the transition from the activities of the day to the rest of the night. The idea that what we consume affects how we sleep is ancient, and the search for the perfect sleep-inducing beverage has been ongoing for thousands of years. Ancient peoples often believed that certain places were more conducive to sleep than others. The location of a bed within a room and the location of a house within a landscape were thought to affect the quality of rest. Beds placed in corners might be considered safer than beds in the center of a room. Houses built on certain types of ground or oriented in certain directions might be thought to promote better sleep. These beliefs varied from culture to culture, but the general idea that the physical environment of sleep mattered was widespread. The wearing of special garments to bed has a long history. Loose, comfortable clothing that allowed for ease of movement during sleep was preferred by those who could afford separate nightwear. The nightshirt, nightgown, and nightcap that became standard in later European periods had precursors in earlier cultures, where the wealthy might have special garments for sleeping. For the poor, who often had only one set of clothes, sleeping in daytime garments was the norm. The luxury of changing into special night clothes before bed was just that, a luxury not available to everyone. Ancient peoples sometimes shared beds not from choice but from necessity. Inns and hostels often had beds in which multiple travelers would sleep together, strangers sharing a sleeping surface because that was all that was available. The discomforts of sharing a bed with unknown persons Their snoring and movements, and possibly their fleas, were part of the expected difficulties of travel. Privacy in sleep was a privilege, and those without it had to make do with the communal arrangements that economy required. The study of ancient sleep reveals something about the nature of rest itself, about what is constant across human experience and what varies with culture and circumstance. The need for sleep is universal, as fundamental as the need for food and water. But the forms that sleep takes, the beds we sleep in and the customs we observe, these are shaped by the particular conditions of our lives. What we share with our ancient ancestors is the nightly journey into unconsciousness, the regular dissolution of waking awareness, the trust that morning will bring a return to the world of light and activity. The pottery and sculpture of ancient cultures sometimes depicted sleeping figures, capturing in permanent form the postures and expressions of rest. These images give us glimpses of how ancient peoples understood sleep, what it looked like and what it meant: a sleeping child curled in peaceful rest, a worker napping during the heat of the day, a god or goddess reclining in eternal slumber. These artistic representations speak to the importance of sleep in ancient life and to the aesthetic appreciation of the restful body. The beds of ancient Egypt were sometimes equipped with footboards that kept the sleeper's feet from sliding off the end of the bed, a practical design feature that addressed the needs of the resting body. These footboards were often decorated, continuing the aesthetic attention given to the bed as a whole. The attention to such details suggests that comfort was valued, that the practicalities of sleep were considered worthy of thought and design. A bed that kept the sleeper comfortably in place through the night was better than one that allowed for awkward positions and disturbed rest. Ancient literature includes many descriptions of sleep and sleeping, from the epic poetry that describes heroes and gods in their rest to the more mundane accounts of daily life in which sleep plays its ordinary part. These literary descriptions give us access to how ancient peoples thought about sleep, what they noticed about it, and what meanings they attached to it. The metaphors used for sleep, comparing it to death or to a journey, or to a kind of forgetting, reveal underlying conceptions that shaped the experience of rest. The sounds of snoring, which must have been as common in the ancient world as they are today, were certainly noticed and probably complained about. Sharing sleeping quarters with someone who snored loudly was a trial, and various remedies were no doubt attempted. The social dynamics of sleep, the ways in which the sleep of one person affected the sleep of others, were an inescapable part of communal living. Finding compatible sleeping partners, whether family members or spouses, was a matter of practical importance as well as emotional significance. The ancient practice of dream incubation, seeking meaningful dreams through special rituals and in special places, suggests that sleep was seen as a valuable opportunity for communication with higher powers. Those who practiced dream incubation would prepare themselves through fasting, prayer, and other rituals, then sleep in a sacred place hoping to receive a divine message. This practice was taken seriously, with the resulting dreams being interpreted by specialists and sometimes influencing major decisions. Sleep was not merely rest, but a potential portal to knowledge and guidance not available during waking hours. The development of locks and bolted doors allowed for greater security during sleep, reducing the vulnerability that came with unconsciousness. Before effective locks existed, sleeping spaces were protected by other means, by watchful dogs, by servants who remained awake, by the simple expedient of sleeping in groups. The ability to lock a door and sleep in relative safety behind it was a significant development, one that affected the experience of rest. To sleep securely without fear of intrusion was a comfort that contributed to deeper and more restful slumber. Ancient writings sometimes discuss the sleep of animals, comparing it to human sleep and speculating about what animals might dream. The observation that animals, like humans, needed to sleep was taken as evidence of a shared biological nature. Some ancient philosophers speculated that animals might have simpler dreams than humans, lacking the capacity for the complex narratives and symbols that human dreams could contain. These speculations about animal sleep reflected broader questions about the relationship between humans and other creatures. The experience of waking from sleep, of the gradual return of consciousness after a night of rest, was attended to by ancient writers. Some described the feeling of confusion that could accompany waking, the momentary uncertainty about where one was or what time it was. Others described the refreshment of waking well rested, the sense of renewal that came with a good night's sleep. The transition from sleeping to waking was a daily miracle, a return from the realm of dreams and darkness to the solid world of daylight. The ancient world had its share of those who needed little sleep, who seemed to thrive on rest that would leave others exhausted. These individuals were sometimes admired for their ability to accomplish more while others slept, and sometimes viewed with suspicion, as if their wakefulness was unnatural or unhealthy. The variations in sleep needs that we observe today were present in ancient populations as well, with some needing more rest and some needing less. These differences were sometimes attributed to temperament, sometimes to constitution, sometimes to the favor or disfavor of the gods. The symbolic meanings attached to beds in ancient cultures extended beyond sleep itself. The marriage bed was a symbol of the union between husband and wife, a sacred space where the family line was continued. The deathbed was the site of final farewells and last words, a liminal space between life and death. The bed of recovery was a place of healing and hope. These different meanings clustered around the same piece of furniture, making the bed one of the most symbolically loaded objects in the ancient household. The Scandinavian peoples of the north developed the concept of the box bed, an enclosed sleeping space built into the wall of the house, with doors that could be closed for warmth and privacy. These built-in beds were like small rooms within the larger room, cozy compartments that retained the heat of the sleeping body and protected against the cold drafts of northern winters. Climbing into such a bed must have felt like entering a cocoon, a safe and warm enclosure that separated the sleeper from the cold world outside. These box beds remained common in parts of northern Europe well into the 19th century, testament to their practical effectiveness. The ancient Polynesians, who colonized the vast Pacific Ocean, developed sleeping customs suited to their tropical island environments. Raised platforms kept sleepers above the ground, away from insects and small creatures. Woven mats provided a clean sleeping surface, and the open construction of traditional dwellings allowed breezes to circulate freely. In these warm climates, the challenge was not staying warm, but staying cool, and the design of sleeping spaces reflected this priority. The gentle tropical night, with its steady temperatures and soft breezes, provided excellent conditions for rest. The beds of ancient Persia were known for their comfort and luxury. Persian carpets, famed for their beauty and craftsmanship, often served as sleeping surfaces, their thick pile providing cushioning and insulation. The wealthy might sleep on multiple layers of carpets, creating beds of extraordinary softness, The tradition of carpet making in the Persian lands produced some of the finest textiles in the ancient world, and these textiles played important roles in daily life, including in the nightly ritual of sleep. Ancient Greek physicians developed theories about the relationship between sleep and the humors, the bodily fluids believed to govern health and temperament. An excess of certain humors might lead to excessive sleepiness, while an imbalance in others might cause insomnia. Treatment of sleep disorders thus involved restoring the balance of humors through diet, exercise, and various medical interventions. This humoral theory of sleep persisted for centuries, influencing medical practice well into the modern era. The custom of telling bedtime stories has ancient roots, with adults throughout history entertaining and comforting children with tales before sleep. These stories served multiple purposes: teaching moral lessons, passing on cultural traditions, and providing a gentle transition from the activities of the day to the rest of the night. The rhythmic cadence of a well-told tale, the familiar patterns of story, the voice of a trusted parent or caregiver, all of these contributed to the sense of safety and comfort that preceded sleep. The bedtime story ritual persists today, connecting modern families to an ancient tradition of nighttime narration. The beds of ancient warriors were often portable and simple, designed for use on campaigns and in temporary camps. A soldier might sleep on the ground with nothing more than a blanket or cloak, or might fashion a rough bed from available materials. The ability to sleep under any conditions, to find rest when and where possible, was essential for military life. Veterans of ancient campaigns would have been accustomed to sleeping in discomfort, accepting the hard ground and the cold night as unavoidable aspects of the soldier's life. The ancient practice of purifying sleeping spaces through fumigation, the burning of incense or aromatic plants, was believed to drive away evil spirits and promote restful sleep. Particular scents were associated with particular effects, and the wise household would know which aromatics to burn for different purposes. This practice combined practical effects, such as repelling insects, with spiritual beliefs about the protective power of certain scents. The modern use of aromatherapy for sleep has ancient precedents, though the explanations for why these practices work have changed. The full moon was often believed to affect sleep, with people reporting more disturbed rest during the nights when the moon was bright. Ancient peoples attributed various powers to the moon, and its effect on sleep was just one of many influences it was thought to have. Whether the full moon actually disrupts sleep through its light, or whether cultural beliefs create expectations that affect experience, the connection between the moon and sleep has been part of human folklore for millennia. Ancient peoples developed various techniques for waking at a desired time, before the invention of alarm clocks made this easy. Some trained themselves to wake naturally at a particular hour, their internal rhythms responding to long habit. Others used mechanical devices, such as water clocks that would trigger bells or drop objects at predetermined times. Some employed servants whose job was to wake the household at the appropriate hour. The challenge of waking when needed, rather than simply when natural sleep ended, has been a human concern for as long as there have been schedules to keep and duties to perform. The ancient art of massage was sometimes used as a preparation for sleep, the relaxation of muscles, and the calming of the body helping to induce drowsiness. Professional masseurs in ancient Rome and Greece offered their services to those who could afford them, and the practice of massage before bed was considered beneficial for health as well as for rest. The touch of another person, the systematic release of tension through skilled manipulation, created conditions conducive to deep and restful sleep. The beds of ancient temples, where priests slept to receive divine communications, were sometimes specially constructed and consecrated for this purpose. These sacred beds were set apart from ordinary furniture, reserved for use in religious rituals rather than everyday rest. To sleep in such a bed was to enter a special relationship with the divine, to open oneself to messages and visions that ordinary sleep might not provide. The preparation for sleeping in a temple bed included fasting, prayer, and ritual purification, all designed to make the sleeper receptive to divine communication. Ancient civilizations developed sophisticated knowledge about medicinal plants, including those that affected sleep. The poppy, source of opium, was known in the ancient world, and its power to induce sleep and relieve pain was well documented. Valerian, still used today as a sleep aid, was known to the Greeks and Romans. Hops, now associated with brewing, were also recognized for their sedative properties. The knowledge of these plants and their effects was passed down through generations of healers and physicians, forming a tradition of herbal medicine that continues to this day. The phenomenon of sleep talking, speaking while asleep, was known to ancient peoples and was sometimes thought to have significance. Words spoken during sleep might be prophetic, revealing hidden truths, or they might be the result of demonic influence. The sleepwalker who talked in their sleep was an object of curiosity and sometimes concern, their unconscious utterances being analyzed for meaning. This attention to what happened during sleep reflects the ancient understanding that the night hours were not simply empty time, but were filled with activities and experiences that might be significant. The ancient Chinese developed the practice of feng shui in part to ensure restful sleep. The placement of the bed, its orientation relative to doors and windows, its position in the room, all were believed to affect the flow of qi, the vital energy that governed health and fortune. A bed placed incorrectly might interfere with the proper circulation of energy, leading to disturbed sleep and poor health. The principles of feng shui for the bedroom included recommendations about colors, materials, and the objects placed near the sleeping area. Ancient peoples recognized that different individuals had different sleep needs and preferences. Some were naturally early risers, waking with the sun and going to bed shortly after dark. Others were night owls, staying active into the late hours and sleeping later in the morning. These variations were sometimes attributed to temperament or constitution, and they affected how individuals fit into the routines of their communities. The flexibility to accommodate different sleep patterns was limited in societies where work schedules were determined by daylight, and where communal living made privacy difficult. The beds of ancient ships, where sailors slept during long voyages, were cramped and often uncomfortable. Space on a ship was limited, and the needs of cargo and crew had to be balanced. Sailors might sleep in hammocks, in bunks built into the sides of the ship, or simply on deck under whatever cover was available. The constant motion of the sea made sleep different from rest on land, and some sailors found this motion soothing while others never adjusted to it. The ability to sleep aboard a ship was essential for those whose lives were spent at sea. The ancient Egyptian practice of sleeping on headrests rather than pillows served several purposes. The headrest kept the head elevated and cool in the hot climate, allowed air to circulate around the head and neck, and preserved the elaborate wigs and hairstyles that were fashionable in Egyptian society. These headrests were often beautifully carved and decorated, serving as both functional objects and works of art. The adjustment to sleeping on such a support must have required some practice, but generations of Egyptians found this arrangement comfortable and appropriate for their needs. Ancient peoples understood that the comfort of the sleeping environment affected the quality of rest. Too hot or too cold, too noisy or too bright, too crowded or too isolated, any of these conditions could interfere with sleep. The effort put into preparing sleeping spaces, from the gathering of soft bedding materials to the building of protective shelters, reflects this understanding. Creating the right conditions for sleep was a practical concern, addressed with whatever materials and techniques were available. The tradition of the sleeper keeping weapons close at hand persisted in many ancient cultures. A sword by the bed or a spear within reach provided some sense of security during the vulnerable hours of the night. This practice reflected the real dangers of life in times and places where violence was common and where households had to provide for their own protection. The presence of weapons near the sleeping area was a reminder that the peace of sleep was never entirely secure, that vigilance might be required at any moment. The ancient world knew the experience of sleeping away from home, of finding rest in unfamiliar places, of the discomfort that came from strange beds and strange surroundings. Travelers wrote about the difficulties of sleeping on the road, the longing for their own beds, the fatigue that accumulated when night after night was spent in inadequate accommodations. This experience of displaced sleep is familiar to modern travelers as well, suggesting that the bond between a person and their customary sleeping place is deep and enduring. The watching over of sleepers, particularly the young and the sick, was an important responsibility in ancient households. Someone would often remain awake while others slept, alert to danger and ready to respond to need. This watcher might be a parent tending a child, a healer attending a patient, a servant guarding a master, or a sentry protecting a camp. The willingness to sacrifice one's own sleep for the safety of others was valued, and those who kept watch through the night were performing a service of love and duty. The ancient world understood that sleep served purposes beyond rest. During sleep, the body healed from the injuries and exertions of the day. The mind processed experiences, consolidating memories and working through problems. Dreams brought insights that might not come during waking hours. Sleep was not merely a pause in living, but an essential part of life itself, a time of active restoration and renewal. This understanding, based on observation rather than scientific measurement, recognized what modern sleep science has confirmed. The beds of the ancient Mediterranean world were often placed against walls, with the head end positioned away from the door. This arrangement allowed the sleeper to see anyone entering the room, providing a small measure of security in uncertain times. The orientation of the bed within the room was not arbitrary, but reflected practical concerns about safety and comfort. The placement of furniture in the bedroom was one of many small decisions that affected the experience of rest. Ancient peoples recognized that certain times of life were associated with different sleep patterns. Infants slept frequently throughout the day and night. Children needed more sleep than adults. The elderly often slept lighter and woke earlier than the young. These variations were accepted as natural, part of the rhythm of life from birth to death. The expectations placed on sleepers varied with their age and condition, and the understanding that sleep needs changed over the lifespan was part of common knowledge. The experience of dreaming, so vivid and so strange, led ancient peoples to wonder about the nature of the mind and its relationship to reality. If the experiences of dreams seemed real while they were happening, what made waking experience any more reliable? These philosophical questions arose naturally from the nightly experience of sleep, and they were addressed by thinkers in many traditions. The study of dreams was not merely a matter of interpretation, but also an invitation to deeper questions about consciousness and reality. The beds of the poor in ancient times were simple indeed, sometimes little more than piles of straw or cloth on a floor. But even these humble sleeping places served their purpose, providing a designated space for rest, a territory within the home where sleep was expected and permitted. The distinction between the sleeping area and other parts of the dwelling, however minimal, acknowledged that sleep was a special state requiring its own conditions. The sound of lullabies, those gentle songs sung to ease children into sleep, has ancient origins. Every culture developed its own lullabies, simple melodies with soothing words meant to calm the child and signal that the time for sleep had come. These songs were passed from generation to generation, from mothers to daughters and fathers to sons, becoming part of the cultural inheritance of communities. The act of singing a child to sleep connected parents and children across the ages, a shared ritual of comfort and care that transcends time and place. As the night deepens around you now, as these gentle words continue to flow past your awareness, you may find yourself thinking of all those ancient sleepers who came before you. They, too, faced the darkness. They, too, surrendered consciousness. They, too, trusted that the morning would come. Whatever anxieties or concerns you carry with you into the night, know that your ancestors carried their own, and yet they slept, and their descendants slept, through countless generations until this moment, until tonight, until you. The beds of history, from the simplest pallets of gathered grass to the most elaborate royal chambers, have all served the same essential purpose. They have provided a space for the body to rest and the mind to dream. They have marked off a territory of peace in a world of activity, a pause in the ongoing effort of living. Your own bed, whatever its form, serves this same purpose tonight. It is a place for you to let go, to release the day, to trust in the process of rest. There is no need to remember anything from these gentle reflections. The details of ancient sleep, the beds and customs and beliefs of peoples long gone, these are not meant to be memorized or retained. They are meant only to accompany you on the journey toward rest, to give your mind something peaceful to drift through as wakefulness fades. Let them go now, as you would let go of a dream upon waking, knowing that their purpose has been served and that nothing more is required. Your body knows what to do. It knows how to breathe, how to digest, how to heal, how to sleep. These processes do not require your conscious attention or direction. They happen on their own, as they have happened every night of your life, as they happened for all your ancestors through all the nights of human history. You can trust this process. You can surrender to it. You can let it carry you where it will. The darkness that surrounds you now, whether literal darkness or the darkness of closed eyes, is the same darkness that has welcomed sleepers for hundreds of thousands of years. It is a safe darkness, a restful darkness, a darkness in which there is nothing to see and nothing to do, and nothing to worry about. Let yourself sink into it, as into a warm bath, as into a soft embrace, as into the waiting arms of rest. The sounds around you, whatever they may be, do not need your attention. Let them fade to the background of awareness. Let them become simply part of the environment, no more demanding of notice than the air you breathe. There is nothing out there that requires your vigilance. nothing that cannot wait until morning, nothing that will not still be there when you wake. For now, there is only rest. For now, there is only the gentle descent into sleep. Let your thoughts become softer now, less defined, more like clouds or mist than like solid objects. They may drift past without engaging you, without requiring response. You do not need to follow them, do not need to solve them, do not need to organize or understand them. They are just thoughts, as insubstantial as dreams, and you can let them go as easily as you would let go of a breath. The weight of your body, settling into whatever supports you, is the weight of a body ready for rest. Let that weight increase. Let every muscle relax. Let every joint release its holding. There is nothing you need to hold up anymore, nothing you need to support or maintain. The bed holds you, the night holds you, the long tradition of sleep holds you. You are safe. You are at rest. Sleep is coming now, as it has always come, as it will always come. It is moving toward you like a gentle tide, rising slowly, carrying you on its swell. Let it come. Let it lift you. Let it take you to wherever it takes you, to the dreams that await, to the deep and dreamless rest, to the morning that will follow in its own time. There is nothing more to say, nothing more to think. Only the slow breathing, only the heavy limbs, only the fading awareness that signals the approach of sleep. Rest now. Rest as your ancestors rested. Rest as all living things rest. Rest, the night receives you. Sleep is here. Let go. Rest. The heaviness that settles into your limbs, the softening of your thoughts, the gradual fading of attention. These are signs that your body is preparing for rest, just as human bodies have prepared for rest since the very beginning of our species. You are participating now in something ancient, something that connects you to every human being who has ever lived, something as natural as breathing, as inevitable as the coming of night. There is no need to remember anything from these gentle words. The facts and images that have drifted through your awareness are not for remembering, but for resting in. Like leaves floating on a slow river, they have passed by, each one carrying you a little further from the shores of wakefulness, a little closer to the deep and peaceful waters of sleep. If you have already begun to drift, that is perfect. If you are still listening, still aware of these words, that too is fine. There is no wrong way to move toward sleep, no correct technique that must be followed. Your ancestors knew this too. They did not have sleep scientists or sleep apps, did not track their sleep stages or optimize their rest. They simply lay down when they were tired, closed their eyes when darkness came, and allowed sleep to take them wherever it would. This natural approach to rest served humanity for hundreds of thousands of years, and it can serve you now. Trust your body. Trust the process. Trust that sleep will come when you are ready, and that you are becoming ready now. The beds of your ancestors, however simple or elaborate, served the same purpose as your own bed tonight. They were places of rest, places of retreat from the demands of the day, places where the body could repair itself and the mind could process its experiences. Whether stuffed with straw or with the finest feathers, whether placed on a cave floor or in a gilded palace, these beds offered the same essential gift: a surface on which to rest, a space in which to sleep, a temporary liberation from the responsibilities of waking life. The darkness that surrounded our ancestors as they slept was deeper than any darkness most of us now experience. Without electric lights, without screens, Without the glow of cities, the night was a profound blackness interrupted only by the moon and stars. In that darkness, the mind could quiet, the eyes could rest, and the body could surrender to the unconsciousness of sleep. If your room is not as dark as those ancient sleeping spaces, that is all right. The darkness you need is the darkness of closed eyes, the darkness of a mind that has ceased its ceaseless activity, the darkness that comes when you simply let go. Let yourself sink now into whatever softness holds you. Let your breathing find its own rhythm, neither controlled nor hurried. Let your thoughts become softer, less distinct, more like clouds than like objects. The night stretches ahead of you, full of hours of rest, full of time for the body to heal and the mind to dream. You do not need to track these hours, do not need to be aware of time passing. Sleep will carry you through the darkness as it has carried every creature that has ever lived. The sounds you may hear now, whether the distant hum of the world or the quiet of your own space, are simply part of the environment in which you rest. They do not need your attention. They can exist without your awareness of them. Let them fade into the background of your consciousness. Let them become like the sounds that accompanied ancient sleepers, the crackle of a dying fire, the breath of others sleeping nearby, the small sounds of the night that were so familiar they did not even register. You are safe here. You are at rest. The words are slowing now, spacing themselves further apart, giving more room for the quiet to fill in. There is nothing more that needs to be said, nothing more that needs to be heard. Only the gentle movement towards sleep, the natural progression from waking to dreaming, to the deep and restorative rest that awaits. Let it come. Let it take you, as it has taken countless billions of your ancestors before you, into the peaceful darkness where dreams begin. You are part of an unbroken chain of sleepers stretching back to the very origins of humanity. And you take your place in that chain tonight, adding your rest to the accumulated rest of all who have come before. There is no need to hold on to anything now. No need to remember, no need to understand. No need to follow these words any further. Only rest, only quiet, only sleep. Breathe out and let go. Breathe in and let peace fill you. Rest now as humans have always rested. Rest now as your ancestors rested before you. Rest